Bagi Walt Harris, petarung UFC yang biasa menghadapi lawan di atas oktagon adalah hal yang biasa. Tapi pertarungan terberatnya justru datang bukan dari lawannya di ring, tapi dari ketidakpastian menunggu kabar tentang putri-tirinya yang menghilang begitu saja. 6 tahun ia bertarung untuk keadilan, 6 tahun juga dia menahan sakit yang tak terucap. Dan akhirnya pembunuh itu harus mempertanggungjawabkan atas perbuatannya. Inilah dia kasus dari Aniah Blanchard. Aniah adalah anak dari pasangan Angela dan Elijah Blanchard. Tapi saat Aniah masih kecil, orang tuanya sudah berpisah. Angela kemudian bertemu dan menikah lagi dengan seorang pria yang mungkin kamu kenal, yaitu Walt Harris, petarung UFC yang dikenal keras di atas ring tapi lembut sebagai seorang ayah. Walt bukan ayah kandung Aniah, tapi bagi Aniah, dia bukan cuma ayah tiri, dan bagi Walt Aniah adalah prinsesnya, dan dialah yang menjadi alasan kenapa Walt bertarung dan kenapa dia bangun setiap pagi. Namun sekarang semuanya sudah berubah. Malam itu, Rabu 23 Oktober 2019, pukul 8 malam, Auburn, Alabama. Anya masuk ke mobilnya, Nissan Altima berwarna hitam. Dia menyalakan mesin, siap untuk pulang menuju keluarga yang menunggunya di rumah. Tapi dalam 90 detik semuanya berubah. Seseorang mendekati mobil Ania, bukan teman dan bukan orang yang ia kenal. Dan dalam sekejap, Ania hilang, tidak ada teriakan dan tidak ada jejak perlawanan, hanya mobilnya yang ditinggalkan di tempat sepi. Beberapa jam berlalu, Ania belum juga berada di rumah. Ania tidak pulang. Tidak ada kabar dan tidak ada jawaban dari teleponnya. Angela, ibunya langsung cemas. Dia coba hubungi Ania berulang-ulang, tapi hasilnya tetap sama. Ania tidak menjawab panggilan. Wal Haris yang saat itu sedang jauh, langsung merasa sepertinya ada yang tidak beres. Bagi seorang ayah, insting itu nyata dan tidak ada keraguan. Malam itu juga mereka lapor polisi dan pencarian pun dimulai. Tapi Auburn adalah kota kecil dan Ania seperti hilang di telan bumi. Hari pertama, keluarga dan relawan menyisir area sekitar pom bensin. Mereka sebarkan foto Anya, berharap seseorang melihat sesuatu. Hari ketiga, FBI turun tangan, kasus ini pun naik level. Tapi tidak ada petunjuk, tidak ada saksi, dan tidak ada jejak digital yang jelas. Ania seperti menghilang tanpa jejak. Dan yang paling menyakitkan, setiap hari yang berlalu harapan semakin menipis. Walt terus bertarung. Dia pakai platformnya sebagai petarung UFC untuk menyebarkan kabar dan untuk meminta bantuan. Tapi waktu terus berjalan dan keadilan masih sangat terasa jauh. Bulan November 2019, lebih dari sebulan sejak Anya menghilang, keluarga masih menunggu. Polisi masih mencari, tapi petunjuk masih nihil. Lalu datang sebuah informasi dari warga, dari seseorang yang tahu sesuatu. Informasi itu mengarah ke satu nama, yaitu Ibrahim Yazid. Usia 36 tahun, punya catatan kriminal, dan yang paling penting, dia ada di Arbon malam Ania menghilang. Polisi mulai bergerak, mereka mengumpulkan bukti, mereka lacak pergerakan Yazid, dan perlahan teka-teki kasus ini mulai nampak titik terang. Desember 2019, Macon County, Alabama, sebuah hutan yang terpencil, tim pencarian menemukan sesuatu. Bukan harapan, Tapi kenyataan yang paling ditakuti yaitu tubuh Aniah Blanchard ditemukan di sana, di sebuah lokasi tidak jauh dari rumah Ibrahim Yazid. Momen itu menghancurkan keluarga, tapi juga memberikan kepastian bahwa Aniah memang menjadi korban kejahatan. Dan sekarang fokus berubah bukan lagi mencari Aniah, tapi mencari keadilan untuknya. Setelah penemuan itu, investigasi masuk ke tahap baru, tahap pemeriksaan bukti. Tim ahli mengumpulkan bukti di lokasi dari serat pakaian, jejak digital, dan yang paling penting, bukti yang menghubungkan Yazid dengan tempat itu. Polisi juga lacak aktivitas Yazid saat malam Aniah menghilang. Dia ada di area pom bensin tempat Aniah kerja. Kamera keamanan merekam mobilnya di lokasi yang sama. Dan ada satu fakta yang membuat kasus ini semakin serius. Saat membunuh Aniah, Ibrahim Yazid sedang dalam status bebas bersyarat. Dia baru saja dibebaskan dengan jaminan untuk kasus kekerasan lain. Artinya, sistem gagal melindungi Aniah. Dengan bukti yang cukup, polisi bergerak, mereka datangi lokasi Yazid dan menangkapnya. Ibrahim Yazid resmi ditahan, dia dihadapkan pada tuduhan berat yaitu penculikan, perampokan, dan pembunuhan. Tapi ini bukan akhir, ini baru awal dari proses hukum yang akan memakan waktu hampir 6 tahun lamanya. Dan selama itu juga, Walt Harris tidak pernah berhenti berjuang untuk keadilan putrinya Aniah. Siapa sebenarnya Ibrahim Yazid? Ibrahim Yazid berusia 36 tahun, pria asal Alabama, dan bukan orang asing bagi sistem hukum. Yazid punya catatan kriminal yang panjang yaitu perampokan, penculikan, dan kekerasan. Dia pernah dipenjara dan pernah juga dibebaskan. Tapi yang paling mengejutkan, saat Ania diculik dan dibunuhnya, Yazid sedang dalam status jaminan pengadilan. Dia dibebaskan sementara untuk menunggu sidang kasus kekerasan lainnya. Artinya, statusnya saat itu masih tersangka. Seharusnya orang dengan status seperti ini tidak boleh berjalan bebas di jalanan. Seharusnya dia masih ditahan, tapi sistem gagal dan Yazid pun bebas di luar melakukan apapun. Lalu, apa motif Yazid? Mengapa Ania? Berdasarkan penyelidikan, malam itu Yazid merampok sebuah toko. Dan Ania kebetulan ada di sana. Dia bukan target awal, tapi dia menjadi saksi. Dan bagi Yazid, satu-satunya cara untuk membersihkan jejak adalah menghilangkan saksi itu. Ania diculik, dibawa ke lokasi terpencil, dan dieksekusi. Ini bukan kejahatan spontan, ini pembunuhan yang direncanakan untuk menutupi perampokan yang dilakukannya. Fakta bahwa Yazid bebas saat membunuh Ania bukan cuma kesalahan satu orang, ini kegagalan sistem. Di Alabama saat itu, hakim tidak punya kewenangan penuh untuk menolak jaminan bail. Untuk sekedar informasi apa itu bail, bail atau jaminan adalah sistem yang mengizinkan tersangka keluar dari penjara sebelum sidangnya dimulai. Dengan membayar sejumlah uang, tersangka boleh bebas dengan janji akan hadir di sidang, tapi untuk kejahatan dengan kekerasan, seharusnya bail tidak diberikan. Sayangnya, saat kasus Aniaya terjadi, sistem ini masih longgar, dan itu yang membuat Yazid bisa berjalan bebas dan melakukan apa saja. Bagi tersangka kejahatan dengan kekerasan, artinya orang yang berbahaya seperti Yazid bisa saja dibebaskan dan berpotensi membahayakan orang lain lagi. Dan kasus Aniah telah membuka mata semua orang, dan dari tragedi ini lahirlah sebuah perubahan yaitu Anai's Law, sebuah amandemen konstitusi Alabama yang disetujui oleh rakyat pada November 2002. Undang-undang ini memberi hak kepada hakim untuk menolak jaminan bail bagi tersangka kejahatan dengan kekerasan. Artinya setelah Ania, sistem jadi lebih ketat dan semoga tidak ada lagi keluarga yang harus merasakan kehilangan seperti ini. Tapi keadilan tidak datang dengan cepat. Dari tahun 2019 ke 2020, lalu 2021, hingga akhirnya 2026. Kenapa bisa begitu lama? Apakah polisi lambat? Tidak. Apakah jaksa tidak serius? Juga tidak. Masalahnya ada di proses hukum. Pengacara Yazid mengajukan berbagai permintaan, tes kesehatan mental, ganti pengacara, penundaan sidang, satu demi satu waktu terus berjalan bagi sistem. Ini mungkin prosedur biasa, tapi bagi keluarganya, ini penyiksaan yang berlahan. Setiap penundaan seperti luka lama yang dibuka kembali. Maret 2026, Macon County, Alabama, sidang akhirnya dimulai. Ruang di pengadilan penuh, keluarga Aniah hadir. Walt Harris duduk di barisan depan. Wajahnya lelah, tapi matanya tetap tajam. Jaksa menyampaikan bukti rekaman CCTV, tes DNA, dan kesaksian orang-orang yang ada di lokasi. Semua mengarah ke satu titik, bahwa Yazid bertanggung jawab atas kematian Aniah. Pihak pembela mencoba berargumen, tapi bukti terlalu kuat dan fakta sudah jelas. Setelah semua bukti disampaikan, saatnya juri bermusyawarah. Ini momen paling menegangkan. Keluarga duduk menunggu 1 jam, 2 jam. Setiap detik terasa begitu lama. Mereka sudah menunggu 6 tahun, tapi di jam ini terasa paling panjang. Dan akhirnya keluarlah keputusan. Juri kembali ke ruang sidang, semua orang berdiri, dan inilah momen yang ditunggu. Semua mata tertuju ke depan. Ketua juri berdiri memegang selembar kertas, kertas yang akan menentukan akhir dari perjuangan ini. Dengan suara tegas, ia membacakan keputusan. Untuk tuduhan pembunuhan, Yazid bersalah. Untuk tuduhan pembunuhan berencana, Yazid juga bersalah. Satu persatu vonis dibacakan, dan akhirnya nama Ibrahim Yazid resmi dinyatakan bersalah. Di barisan depan, Walt Harris menarik nafas panjang. Bahunya sedikit turun, seolah beban berat yang ia pikul selama 6 tahun akhirnya terkuak. Tapi ini bukan kemenangan yang mudah, karena vonis ini bukan atas tuduhan tertinggi. Yazid tidak dihukum metong. Dia dihukum penjara seumur hidup. Bagi sebagian orang ini mungkin terasa kurang, tapi bagi Walt, yang penting keadilan akhirnya ditegakkan. Keadilan untuk Aniah akhirnya didengarkan. Dalam pernyataannya, Walt berkata, "Hari ini kami selangkah lebih dekat untuk keadilan bagi Aniah. 6 tahun dia bertarung, 6 tahun dia menahan sakit, dan akhirnya suaranya didengar. Pada 7 Mei 2006 akan ada sidang penentuan hukuman. Di sana, hakim akan memutuskan apakah Yazid akan menjalani sisa hidupnya tanpa kemungkinan bebas bersyarat. Dan Yazid masih punya waktu untuk mengajukan banding, jadi perjuangan hukum masih berlanjut. Tapi satu hal yang pasti, nama Aniah Blanchard tidak akan pernah dilupakan, karena dari tragedi ini lahirlah Aniah's Law, sebuah hukum yang melindungi ribuan orang dari kegagalan sistem yang sama, dan ini adalah warisan Aniah. Dan ini cara kita mengingatnya. Kasus Aniah Blanchard mengajarkan kita satu hal yang penting, keadilan memang bisa tertunda, tapi tidak pernah terlambat untuk diperjuangkan. Walt Harris tidak pernah menyerah. Keluarga Aniah tidak pernah berhenti berharap, dan akhirnya kebenaran menemukan jalannya. Semoga dari tragedi ini kita semua belajar untuk lebih peduli, untuk lebih waspada, dan untuk tidak pernah diam saat melihat ketidakadilan. Kalau kamu suka dengan cerita-cerita seperti ini, jangan lupa untuk like, subscribe, dan nyalakan lonceng notifikasinya agar kamu tidak ketinggalan kasus-kasus true crime lainnya. Dan jangan lupa untuk memberikan komentarmu di setiap video. Jaga kesehatanmu dan selalu waspada. Sampai jumpa di kisah berikutnya.
right down here for us? Do you mind just saying your name first?
William Motley, Terry Luck, Carmelo. Carmelo Finn. Here, somebody said.
What's your last name?
You know, you always go into trial and want an acquittal when you represent a client charged with a crime. But when you look at this case and realize the state was seeking and had spent almost 7 years getting this case to trial, then you know it's the better outcome. It's not what the other side wanted. So, you know, I appreciate the hard work of the Macon County jurors that spent the last 3 weeks of their lives having to go through this. A very difficult job to ask a juror to have to sit through a case like this with the amount of public interest. But they were very considerate. They were deliberate. They took all this time to go through thousands of pages of records and photographs. Now, they didn't see everything in this, but what they saw, there was a significant amount. The court report is upstairs boxing the materials up now in the court exhibits, and there's a lot of stuff here. But I do want to say this, and I'm very sorry for the family of Miss Blanchard and what they went through. I mean, it's something that is going to impact them and has impacted them for almost 7 years. A terrible thing to have to go through. And we recognize and acknowledge that. I'm sorry for them. But at the same time, our system of criminal justice in this country, the bedrock is that you're innocent until proven guilty. And this is a case where everybody had already convicted Mr. Yazid and were ready to sentence him to death from the very beginning. And I've represented him now for almost 7 years. And I don't know if any of you were here when we had the preliminary hearing in Lee County on this. And we told the judge then that he wasn't a Lee County case because they didn't have jurisdiction, they didn't have any evidence to have the case in Lee County. And they didn't have evidence of a kidnapping capital murder based on what they had. But the DA at the time misstated the evidence, if not outright lied about the evidence. And the case stayed in Lee County. It took them 3.5 years to get an indictment in Macon County. It took them another full year to give us discovery in this case. That's 4 years after Mr. Yazid was arrested before we saw any of the discovery. And quite honestly, it took several months after that for us to be able to open some of the discovery they gave us because the condition that it was in. So, you know, that's 4 years from the time he was arrested before we even had evidence of what this case was about. And some members of the public and some media members, quite honestly, kept trying to blame the delay on this case on the defense. And if you'll check the records, and I've told a couple of you this, you can check the records. We never filed a motion to continue the trial of this case. Not a single motion to continue this case. We were asked when we would be ready. We stated our opinion. And we got a trial setting. It was earlier than we wanted it to be, but we did everything we could to be ready. And I think we were. So anybody says we delayed this case, you're just not dealing with the truth. And on that subject, there's a lot of things that were not true about this case that people said. When we were interviewing the jurors, prospective jurors in this case, we had 2 or 3 that swore they'd seen a video of Miss Blanchard being forced into a car at that Chevron gas station. They said, I know it's true. I saw the video. There is no video. There never was a video that showed that because it didn't happen. We had people swore that said, well, I know his DNA is there. I know he did it. Well, those of you that sat in there know there was no DNA evidence connecting Mr. Yazid in this case. The only DNA evidence of Mr. Yazid was the sample that he gave under court order. But the false information, the misstatements, rising to almost a level of a lynch mob, to get Mr. Yazid on this capital murder charges. He was irresponsible, and I'm not saying any of you members of the media did, but you know, nowadays the media is a very wide scope, and people believe things that there's no basis in fact to believe. So Mr. Yazid's convicted. He's convicted of felony murder and murder on the 2 counts. And we'll come back in May for a sentencing hearing, and we intend to file a notice of appeal dealing with the issues raised in this trial. We are happy that we will not have a penalty phase and have to deal with the death penalty in this case. Based on the evidence in this case, those of you who sat through the trial, you know that this wasn't a death penalty case based on the evidence that the state had. So, if you've got any other questions, y'all want to add anything?
No.
I'll say this, one other thing. We're appointed in this case. There are people out there saying that Mr. Yazid had these high-paid private lawyers doing the job that we did. That's laughable. Most people charged with capital murder and death penalty case, they don't get a paid lawyer because they can't afford one. So you're stuck with lawyers that are paid not what a private lawyer would be paid to represent these people. And we do as best a job we can with what we get. And it's an uphill struggle. And the public ought to appreciate the people, not just in this case, but in all these type of cases throughout the state that handle these death penalty cases. And it's a thankless task, but we do it. We don't do it for the money. Good grief. If we make money, we'd go practice some other kind of law, because you can't make money doing this. But it's an obligation and responsibility. We take an oath as we become attorneys in this state, and we follow that oath. So,
can you tell us about Mr. Yazid's demeanor after the verdict?
Mr. Yazid has remained very calm, and he listened carefully to all the evidence, a great deal of which the first time he heard it was there from the witness stand. He's concerned. I think you heard him speak up. Some of you in the courtroom may have heard him say that he wanted to appeal, and we'll do that at the appropriate time. But you got to do the sentencing first. There's certain days and deadlines, and we've advised him as to that. So there's not an appeal filed yet because it's not timely.
So do you plan to file an appeal?
Well, we get through the sentencing first. There's some post-trial motions that we anticipate filing as well, and the clock won't start running on the time frame for an appeal until all of that is completed.
Mr. Watley, you feel like from day one the narrative was not the true narrative. You have an opportunity now. You're not under gag order. What do you think happened that night based on the evidence that you've seen?
Well, I'm not going to go through and say what I think will happen. I'm going to say that those of you that listen to the evidence case know that the narrative that was put out 6.5 years ago is not what the evidence in this case was.
And in your opinion, what did the evidence show?
Well, it didn't show a kidnapping and a capital murder and a robbery and a capital murder.
What did it show then?
So the jury spoke on that. We'll deal with it later. Let me tell you about that. Mr. Yazid has been made a scapegoat by the elected politicians in this state for 6.5 years. They made him an example on false evidence and statements that had no basis in fact. He was released in Montgomery County on that charge that everybody's spoken about for 6 years because he was entitled to a bond, and the district attorney didn't object to him being released. Nobody reported that. Instead, you castigated Mr. Yazid and the judge. And the judge did what he would normally do. He was entitled to a bond. The DA didn't object. He set a high bond, and he got out on bond. But the politicians made it say that, oh my God, this man got out. The judge was terrible. How could he let him out? It's easy. When everybody's in agreement, you get a bond, you get a bond. But instead, they went to the legislature and got this whole new package passed in his name and said he did a terrible thing and the judge did a terrible thing. That's not what happened. And nobody has taken the time to go back and look at the facts and the evidence and the records to see that that wasn't the truth. Now, whose fault is that? I've been under a gag order for 6.5 years. I couldn't say it. So look back at yourselves. So your speedy trial bill, they used him again to say that this was a terrible case. They said the judges are delaying the case, which wasn't true. They said the defense counsel are delaying this case, which absolutely was not true. I already told you the timeline that nobody reported on as well. From the time he was bound over to the grand jury in Lee County to the time he was indicted in Macon County. So the basis for your whole Speedy Trial Act, which is basically the Attorney General gets to decide who goes to trial when, is based on a false premise as well. Sure, we got problems with dockets being overloaded, judges having too many cases, but that's a problem with the system. It's not a problem because of this case. If you look at the facts, you'll see that that's not true. But it made no difference. So now we have this new act. So again, just report the facts. People out there are going to make their own conclusions. They're going to make stuff up either. But if the media would report what the facts are about why these things happen, maybe you'd get a few more people that would say, well, maybe that's true, instead of just rushing in and saying the things that are not true.
Do you accept the jury's verdict of the felony murder and the murder? Do you accept that your client was responsible for her death according to the jury?
I'm not going to accept or admit anything. The jury spoke, that's their verdict. We'll follow the appropriate steps, do what we're required to do, and what his rights are to pursue going forward after a jury verdict. So, anything else?
One thing, there was a little bit of confusion about the breakdown of charges. Could you kind of like break down what the verdicts are for the felony murder versus murder?
The felony murder was on the count 1, which was kidnapping, capital murder.
Capital murder.
The intentional murder would have been count 2, which was robbery, capital murder. And y'all never asked about count 3.
They dismissed it.
The state of Alabama dismissed that charge.
Who reported that, sir?
So, well, not everybody. So, that was their motion. So that's why there were only 2 alternatives for the jury to consider. All right? Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
See you in the next one. Aniah's dad is coming to speak. Aniah's dad's coming to speak.
Should get out of the way.